Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yes. Is it recording now? Yeah,
Recording.
excellent.
I have a little one.
Okay, I'd like to open the meeting. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out on this muddy evening. This is the special meeting. It's 6:02, March 17th, to discuss primarily the expansion project commission, but we'll go through our normal routine here of changes to the agenda. We do have a couple, two things. We're going to take out the discuss and approve municipal planning grant and the reaffirm legal counsel.
There is still need to reaffirm council.
There is?
There is still
Okay,
need to reaffirm council.
I didn't know that. Okay,
For what reason? Since we voted, as long as the ethics came back, that we could do anything that was their counsel.
I guess the question is, the ethics commission came back with a maybe.
Well, yeah, it is possible if there's no benefit, and so therefore we can have counsel for negotiations, whether we can do
Okay.
the sale is different.
If that's the interpretation,
Yeah,
awesome.
I think we're in
and,
good shape.
and maybe at another step, we'll have to do something more formal.
And one more change to the agenda, the Development Review Board requested that Jesse Cooper be appointed to the Development Review Board.
Okay, we can do that. We'll add that. We will be having an executive session at the end of tonight to discuss real estate and possibly personnel issue, but mostly real estate. Any announcements from the board? Public comment? Anybody have a question? David? Name, please.
Oh, there's the mic.
Can you use this
Gotta
so
use the
people can hear?
microphone.
People online can hear you better.
1 second. You just gotta slide this. There we go.
Okay. I think the select board's aware we have a petition, that there's a group of people who put together a petition and. Yes. Is now, regarding the committee, the expansion project committee. I wasn't sure, we weren't sure whether you wanted to present it now during public comment or during the expansion.
If it's okay with the rest of the board, given that it specifically speaks to replying to another document, I wonder if when we get to the committee item, we hear about that other document and then we hear about your response. That might make more sense from so people can track what's happening.
That seems fine. Yeah, thank you. Any other comments? Yes.
There was an agenda question that I talked with.
You gotta say your name.
Arian Boomery, there was an agenda question that I spoke with Karen Hatcher, the town grants administrator before, because it was originally warned that there's a municipal planning grant item on the agenda. But Karen actually, there is a planning grant item different than the one Karen had spoken to, and that is the ACC. There are two grants that are called a municipal planning grant, believe it or not. One of them, the town is not applying for. The other one, the town is applying for, and it's on the April 7th select board meeting agenda. So just for clarity on that.
Okay, we already removed we were talking about removing the planning grant tonight.
It's probably fine to say that
Okay.
would happen in April, but I spoke with Karen earlier today and she said, oh, shoot, can you make sure that this is clarified? So I just.
Great, thank you.
That.
That's,
you.
that's
Why
helpful.
are you only applying for one?
I think because the other one had some specific, sorry. I think it was determined by Karen and others that the other one was not appropriate fit at this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's limitations to some of these.
What is the other one? One of them is a community development block grant, municipal planning grant through the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And the other one is provided by a different agency, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the details but that's the one we are applying for is the community development block grant.
Okay.
Right. Yes, and the other one, I'm sorry, that we're not applying for, I can't remember what agency it's.
It just didn't seem like a good fit this time, is that right?
I think that's right. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, thank you. Next, we took out the next item. And discussion of the official committee to develop the official committee for the village expansion project. I'd just like to throw out a few thoughts here. We don't intend to appoint anyone tonight. We'd like to know who's interested, and we'd like to discuss how we, because it's our commission now, how we would like this what we would like the goals to be for this commission. And but we would leave it to the commission to establish who would the leader be and reporting to the board and that kind of thing. So we don't want to get too deep in the weeds ourselves, but we trust that there's enough interest in this that we'll have a good commission. It is also our intention to have varying views from a lot of different people, abutters and folks who have been working on this since July, and just different people on this commission, so we get a really good rounded feel for what we need to do. And we did find at the town meeting that the town did support us moving to this step. And I wouldn't say the town is ready to do it. So we need to get the feedback from this committee to tell us what they think we should be doing, and we can then decide. So given that, anyone who want to start?
Do you think we should start with the two proposals
I-
that we received?
Yes,
So maybe
yeah,
someone from the village expansion steering committee can talk about their proposal, and then
yeah,
either Dave, right? David or
David,
someone
yeah.
else from the other proposal could speak after. Does that make sense?
that makes sense, yes. Who would like to? Okay, you have it. Or do you need the mic?
Arian Boomery, and I have a copy of the proposal that was submitted on behalf of the 16 members of the steering committee.
Can you make sure you speak up a little?
Yeah,
Thanks.
sorry.
Yeah.
Is this on? Yeah, it is. Okay, cool.
I think you should have to be close to your mouth.
Yeah, thank you. As a little bit of background, I do want to preface that this conversation emerged immediately after the flood of July 2024. And at the time, it was sort of a question that I asked the select board.
Mhm.
What do we think about this? Is this an interesting idea? Do we need this at the time? And the select board at the time, which was Patty and Carl were on the select board at that time, and as was Jim Bowles, said, that sounds interesting. Let's figure out a way to explore it. And there were several conversations that happened at various times, and it kept coming back up. Let's figure out a way to explore this and develop it into a viable plan. And I think that context is important because that established a trajectory that the group has been operating under since that period of time of how do we make this a viable plan? This is not a theoretical exercise. This is not, wouldn't this be nice? This is how do we really do this? And the group has been operating, I think, in good faith the entire time to make sure that we have actionable things, that we're not proposing things that are unfeasible. We're not proposing things that we don't have money for, and we're not proposing anything that we don't have a clear path of how it could actually be done or paid. So within this context, this proposal is presented as a way of formally continuing the work that has been done to date, and I think should be taken very seriously at face value as that, because to somehow expand and rehash and take this project another direction, something I'm not personally interested in. To do this all over again, it would be disingenuous. We have had a design workshop in this room attended by over 60 people who are registered voters in the town of Plainfield. We've had multiple public surveys with over 100 responses. Speaking with a few other people, Sandy, who's not here this evening, and Rick, who I was on the committee, have been involved in development. We have had more public input to date than most processes see ever in their construction. And so those responses, that input, that's from real people. And we also had a public vote that voted 4-1 in favor of this. That's different from a survey or a petition. Those were the people who showed up and voted. And so I think we need to acknowledge that within this context, that there are that while everybody gets a chance to voice their opinion, we are not going to achieve consensus in this process. And that is okay. So within that context, the group presented with, that's my context that I'm bringing. I don't think everybody necessarily signed up for that, but I think it's important as that background. Those were things that I lived. The group proposes that the committee develop and implement a financially feasible plan, create infrastructure and sellable lots for a new neighborhood east of the current lower village on 23.9 acres of land currently owned by Syringa Investments and Pigeon Pond. With the following goals, which have been goals that have been reiterated throughout this process: rehouse those affected by the floods of July 2023 and July 2024. Provide additional affordable housing amid Vermont's housing crisis, include a mix of single-family homes, duplexes, tiny homes, and apartments. Revitalize the town, prioritizing flood displaced and other Plainfield residents, restore lost tax base. With the goal of starting to place infrastructure in 2025 and homes as early as 2026. Time is of the essence. There are some people who've received preliminary notification that their buyout has been accepted as of last week. So this is happening right now. Create public, common, and open space and paths that enrich the lives of Plainfield residents generally. The advisory committee, because that would be the formal group, it would be called an advisory committee, which is distinguished in state law from a non-advisory committee.
Is there a distinction between committee and commission? Is one of the questions coming on the Zoom?
I think Carl's misspeaking when he calls it a commission.
It's a
A
committee.
commission has very specific rules. This is not a commission.
Oh, the group you're with is a group.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying the new thing we're creating is not a committee.
It's a committee.
It's a committee.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Within Vermont statute, I believe it would be called an advisory committee. As a
Yes.
technical term. Which means it does not have, it doesn't make binding decisions essentially, except on very limited items. Otherwise, it generally makes recommendations. That's the distinction between an advisory and a non-advisory. So the work of this new committee should build upon the work of the Village Expansion Steering Committee using draft neighborhood designs created at the February 8th Community Design Workshop and further refined through significant public input as a foundation. This initial site plan draft is currently in early review with the Plainfield Development Review Board to identify any significant issues or obstacles can be modified and deemed as necessary by the advisory committee, taking into account future input. That's actually what we wrote on the 9th. I do want to say that was not formally submitted. That was went through what was called a sketch approval, which is just asking questions about feedback, about process. The scope of work. We're an advisory body. We do not, quote, have supervision, control, jurisdiction, or legislative, quasi-judicial tax or budget legislative, quasi-judicial tax or budgetary matters. That's from state statute about what distinguishes an advisory committee from a non-advisory committee. So we don't spend money. We only recommend expenditures to the select board, as is the case with other chairs on certain committees. If the select board chooses, they may designate the chair as a purchasing agent for matters less than $3,000 within a larger budget. This is consistent with the town purchasing policy effective October 14th, 2019, which is still in place. We recommend contracts to the select board, such as land agreements, testing, engineering, and eventually construction. We make informed design decisions by soliciting feedback from both community members and relevant experts. We make process recommendations about decisions such as how to sell parcels and pricing. We would initiate and oversee all permitting applications on behalf of the town. We would develop an execution plan for overseeing day-to-day construction, recommending professional agents. And we would coordinate with other town committees and departments directly as needed, such as water and wastewater, roads, planning, recs, and public art. At this point in the process, we're pretty close to wrapping up a $30,000 engineering contract that has developed the preliminary designs for roads, water and sewer layout. So the notion that somehow we would want to redesign roads at this point would be pretty crazy in my mind. Based on how the land is laid out, based on the fact that independently 10 groups during the design charrette came up with remarkably similar road designs. Yeah, independently, there are contours of the lay of the land, there are wetlands, there are slopes. There is really a kind of logic that fits up there on that site. And that just, it keeps coming up over and over again. The proposal would be for a limited term and a time commitment. So the committee would dissolve when either one, in the committee's opinion, the project is deemed unfeasible. Or two, the following 5 items are accomplished. A project bond vote successfully passes, the completion of the permitting process, the execution of all needed land purchase agreements, delivery of a land sales plan to the select board, delivery of a project execution plan to the select board. The term is expected to be less than 1 year from the date of creation. All members will be expected to join at least one subcommittee and put in time contribution of at least 3 hours a week every week. This is a substantial time commitment for a limited term because time is of the essence and the goal is to get this done actually. There's a number of the decision-making process will hold regular meetings and conduct itself according to 24 VSA section 4433 on advisory committees and submissions. It's not a particularly enlightening section of the code. It basically means it functions like most other committees in town. Final decisions and formal recommendations would be made by majority vote following the relaxed version of Robert Rules of Order, as followed by the select board and other town committees. Essentially, it functions very similar to other committees in town. Membership committee, we suggest a committee of up to 21 people with an odd number of members. Anyone may apply. An application should be posted online. This is all known. The committee, we recommend that preference would be given to 1, current members of the Village Expansion Steering Committee because of their in-depth knowledge of the project and its various complexities. We have done a lot of work to date. There will be a tremendous learning curve getting up to speed. And that's important. Also, people who've been putting months and months of work into this and have a demonstrated commitment to the project deserve a certain amount of priority, I believe. Up to 2 abutters and or immediate neighbors who understand and agree with the goals of the project. We make this distinction between people who are opposed to the project as a whole versus those who have specific concerns. While it is important to include dissenting voices, a committee that is designed, that sets itself up to be acrimonious out of the gate based more on philosophical distinctions is not a successfully created committee, in my opinion. Up to 2 prospective buyers from the current list of people who have submitted interest online, which is currently around 40 people. 1 member of the select board and potentially one Marshfield resident residing within half a mile of the proposed new neighborhood. As probably most people know, it's very close to the town. And there are people who live in Marshfield that are essentially members of Plainfield. I think it's a fair way to say it. There's some suggested ground rules. Sorry, this is a little bit of a lengthy proposal, but it was worth thinking about. Commitment to conceive a viable settlement on the property, utilizing the foundational work that's already done by the ad hoc Village Expansion Steering Committee and guided by the 8 goals that I stated earlier. A willingness to listen and put oneself in other shoes, a willingness to work hard on this committee because the work is time sensitive. Willingness to complete the project without grant funding. While getting grants is great, we have had some grants that have received to date, but to say that we need to count on something that we have not successfully been awarded would be to put ourselves in a foolish position. Willingness to compromise, willingness to be respectful and take turns speaking, and to demonstrate integrity. We proposed some work groups, but that as sort of a way of breaking up work across the committee and making sure that things get done by smaller groups of people. But that is much more of an internal committee discussion that the committee can have if and when it's formed. So that is the overview of the proposal. I don't know if there's any clarifying questions from the select board or others.
You've had a chance to read that. Any? Okay, David, do you want to maybe pick up on the things that you feel we should add to what was mentioned?
So, I guess, we have a petition. It's,
Can your name, please?
yeah, David Scheckman,
There we go. Yeah,
is that better?
yes.
There, a group of us put together a petition very recently. Somewhat different, parameters
Okay,
for the committee. I can read it, as Arian did, I will, you know, I have my own commentary, my own reaction to what Arian had to say. I'm gonna hold off, I'll do the petition first, I think, if that makes sense, because I can't speak for the people, I can read the
Yeah.
petition, we can give you a list, I think, of the people who signed it.
that'd be great. Yeah,
That speaks for itself. I'll have a brief commentary of what I think.
Sure.
And there's other people, I think, who were part of the petition. Putting together the petition that might want to say something. I know Janice does. I don't know if anybody else does. So I'll start
yeah, why don't you go ahead
with
and
the petition.
read that? Mhm.
To the Plainfield Select Board regarding the prospective town advisory committee on East Hill housing. The drafters of this position are responding to a memo, the memo that Arian read, provided to the Select Board from the Village Expansion Steering Committee. The drafters feel that while the memo makes many good recommendations, alterations are necessary to better embody the affirmative democratic spirit that appeared at town meeting when voters approved an article to establish a reserve fund. We, the undersigned, believe that the yes vote on the reserve fund indicates a willingness to proceed with a town plan to enable construction of new housing between East Hill and Main Street. Neither the article nor the discussion preceding it at the meeting necessarily support the wholesale adoption of what is known as the village expansion plan. It is the stated intention of the Select Board to appoint an advisory committee of townsfolk. The suggestions of the VESC, Village Expansion Steering Committee, are quite specific, and we feel they contradict the spirit of the discussion during town meeting. Residents did not vote to explicitly approve the village expansion plan, yet the memo specifies, and this is quoting the memo, the steering committee recommends a 21-member committee with a preference given to current members of the village expansion steering committee because of their in-depth knowledge of the project and its various complexities, up to 2 abutters and or immediate neighbors who understand and agree with the goals of the project. We make a distinction between people who are opposed to the project as a whole versus those who have specific concerns. Up to 2 prospective buyers from the current list of people who have submitted interest online, 1 select board member, 1 Marshfield resident residing within a half a mile of the proposed new neighborhood. We believe that the steering committee, despite both its hard work and the knowledge it has gathered, has no right to determine the composition of a town-appointed group. We do not feel that the vote on March 4th gave the select board a mandate to privilege the sole vision of the steering committee, but rather to open the conversation to allow other voices and perspectives into the visioning and implementing process. Including residents. Including residents who support and those who have been critical of the vision of the steering committee up to this point. Judging by Front Porch Forum, Plainfield people, and discussions at various meetings, it's clear that there is a very large, at least comparable number of residents, hardly acknowledged by the committee, who are critical of how the project has proceeded up to now. For the democratic process to be representative and effective, both constructive and critical voices need to be included. Thus, we believe it is the role of the select board to establish an equitable selection process that ensures diverse representation. The project itself will require a great deal of input and oversight from the select board, and it should move forward with a committee that is responsible to that board, not to the current steering committee. While we appreciate the desire on the part of the BESC to proceed as quickly as possible in order to provide housing soon, we also feel that a project of this size and scope, especially if it hopes to win approval by a majority of residents, requires more time and more careful consideration, and also a more meaningful attempt to compromise with residents who may not share the steering committee's particular vision and plan. While it might seem moral to favor housing as many people as possible, as fast as possible, it is nevertheless undemocratic to push through an agenda that has not yet been democratically endorsed. Therefore, based on the prior work of the BSCC, we recommend the following alternative guidelines. To establish an East Hill Housing Advisory Committee to explore the feasibility of creating infrastructure for new housing on East Hill within the 23.9 acres of land currently owned by Syringa Investments LLC and Pigeon Pond LLC. Purpose: East Hill Housing Advisory Committee shall explore the feasibility of creating infrastructure for new housing on East Hill with the following goals. Possibly expand tax base, expand water, wastewater user base. Determine a timeline according to what makes the most sense logically, ecologically, and financially. Spare Plainfield taxpayers all costs. Enrich the lives of those affected by the flood as well as existing and future Plainfield residents. Membership: up to 15 Plainfield residents. The select board shall publicly discuss the reasoning for any appointment decisions. While the steering committee members and supporters should certainly make up some proportion of the new committee, the select board should strenuously avoid what seems to be the steering committee's recommendation of a committee makeup that stacks the committee ahead of time in favor of the steering committee's vision of how things should proceed, thereby biasing the outcome. The necessarily problematic selection process must ultimately aim for a comprehensive representation of all the residents of Plainfield. Decision-making process. Too many acronyms. The ECHAC, that would be the committee that we're proposing. And any subcommittees thereof shall hold meetings consistent with Vermont's open meeting law. And may adopt supplemental rules of procedure as needed. Decisions will be made by majority vote. Dissolution. EHHC will dissolve when the select board decides by majority vote to dissolve the committee. So that's what we came up with. I think there's now 56 or 57 signatures, which we got over a relatively short period of time, and I think somebody has a list to hand in to give to the select board. Okay, so that's that. My personal take, and I'm not generally someone who's speaking in front of a group of people, so keep that in mind. I have a very different view from Arian's view. I have a very different view of how the committee has operated. I was watching the meeting where Arian, and I don't mean, I'll say the committee, flatly refused to allow open meetings and allow for more people to participate in making a plan. I know there's been the design charrette and all of that stuff. I have a very different view of the value of that. And what it came up with. And in that way, I agree with Arian, because I think it's the land and, engineering that is the most defining feature. So, you know, it's a great participation event, great for the people who were into it. I don't think it shows that the town of Plainfield is behind this project. I also don't think the vote at town meeting showed that. Only the people who can come to town meeting, which is by no means everybody in town. So, you know, I'm not gonna go much deeper than saying I have a really different view. In terms of the committee and how you appoint the committee, how the select board chooses to appoint the committee. For somebody like me, to consider participating, there needs to be very strong guidelines about what, the charge of the committee is. It couldn't be anything like what Arian is describing, because that's then me entering into a situation where I have no power, or it's gonna be nothing but confrontations. There's been people already posting on Facebook about how much they're gonna push for as many lots as possible. And if it means breaking some eggs, that doesn't matter. That kind of thing for me is like intimidating and inappropriate. So, you know, I think it's a tough position for you guys to be in. You know, you'll decide, and I don't know, so other folks who wanna.
Denise? Thank you, David.
Oh, okay, so thanks, everybody.
Can you share?
I'm
Can you-
Denise Gorilla. And Paula, what are you, is there something I'm doing wrong? Did the select board just starting speaking?
Carl just did, yeah.
I just said, yeah, I recognized.
Okay.
Oh, you had your hand up?
It's up
Okay,
now. I didn't realize you were transitioning.
yeah, you're gonna have to make sure I see it.
Okay, I guess I want to make a little bit of an emotional appeal. There's been
Hey,
maybe
guys.
too much
Yeah.
emotion, but a number of people who haven't experienced what I've experienced, don't really understand, I think, how we got to this point. Perhaps Arian's speech that he just gave gives a little bit of a glimpse of welcome to my world. But I want to sort of explain, and I'm still idealistically hoping that we can move forward with this project despite what he just said. But if it doesn't happen that way, then we'll figure out, you know, at the bond vote, what happens or whatever. But so basically, I was hoping that this would be a meeting where we could move forward, not look back and sort of lick our wounds. There's been a lot of bad feeling on both sides. But I feel I need to sort of explain why I got where I am. And that does mean licking a little bit of wounds, in the sense that, you know, I started out being interested in this project. I was actually asked to be on the committee because I was interested in the project. Then when I saw how many plots were planned, I didn't like it. And I was pretty quickly shown that that sort of idea wasn't even welcomed, the idea that we could have fewer lots. So it sort of put me in a place where I was like already a naysayer as opposed to a contributor or someone in a conversation. And I became frustrated. It seemed like it was public, but it really wasn't. When it came to matters of how many lots, matters of how it would be funded, matters of the timeline. At one meeting, and I want to apologize that I actually blurted out that I wanted the project to fail. But the reason why I said that was because at that point I was so frustrated, and what I meant was this particular project at this particular speed, in this particular discourse. So the question was raised on Facebook the other day in response to the petition. What's undemocratic about a group of really motivated people getting together, being on a committee, and then having a vote about it? And I've been thinking a lot about that and what I meant by democratic. And it's democratic in a basic sense, but I don't think it's democratic in the deeper sense. In that sure, people do more work, get more, have more influence. They deserve it, maybe you could say. They're there, they show up, they do the work. But if that committee doesn't actually incorporate or consider the views of a large group of the community, and you may disagree that this is what happened, but this was how I felt. If the committee treats questions and concerns as things to refute, as talking points, rather than to really consider them, and unfortunately, I didn't just make that up. I mean, there was an email chain that I wasn't supposed to see that I saw where, there were things that people were concerned about. In this case, it was particularly how many plots and the density, and the committee was discussing, oh, I know how to refute that. We know how to show those people, your neighbors, your community members, that they're stupid, basically, and wrong. And that didn't feel right to me. But I get it, I know, I've been on sides of, but it's more like a political campaign than a community discussion to me. So the committee has felt to me like a group that already knew what they wanted, with a silo of supporters around them, and only those people's voices mattered. The people who didn't agree were seen as, unenlightened, selfish, backward. I happen to still believe in democracy, at least small town democracy. And I think that we can do better. So what I'm hoping, despite what Arian just said, and I see, and really, this isn't personal. It really isn't. And I, said to a lot of people, I'm sorry that it felt personal and it got personal. But what I would hope, and what I ask you to do, and if it doesn't happen, fine, it's okay. I'm not gonna, I would hope that whoever is on this committee will take the concerns and the voices and the ideas of their fellow community members seriously, respect them, and listen to them. But, and I wrote here, is it too late for that? And it sounds like maybe it is. Maybe, and I don't know what everyone on the committee really feels. And Arian was very clear and said he wasn't speaking for everyone. But maybe it's too late for that. And if it is too late for that, and the committee is going to go ahead with their map and their timeline, I fear that, one, the project won't be as good as it could be. If they've been taken more slowly, if other views had been taken seriously, and two, that if it doesn't do that, if the committee doesn't listen to the other people in the town. Oh, I had something really important to say that I left out. Let me see if I can find it. It's just that I understand and I respect the fact that the people on the committee care passionately about this. But just because you feel that this is good and right and holy, and that it's good for everyone in town, that shouldn't be enough. It's not your decision what's good for everyone in the town. So my last point then is, if the committee doesn't seriously, earnestly, whoever's on this committee, try to hear what people say, I'm afraid that you will not succeed. And that's not a threat. It's not, I'm not saying, oh, if you don't do what I say, people are going to vote against you. But it just doesn't work that way in a small town like this. I don't think it can. So thanks.
Thanks, James. Paula,
No,
you,
just waiting for Carl to call on people.
Paula has been recognized. Thank you for recognizing me. Paula Emery, I'm curious about the purpose of this meeting. What I'm hearing is, what I'm concerned about is that I'm not sure I'm hearing that there's recognition that there was a vote on town meeting day and that select board has been charged with choosing a committee. Is that correct?
this committee will be reporting to the select board,
Yeah,
and we will be appointing people for the committee.
right, so,
And part of this is to figure out the mix and who would want to be on it,
And the
And-
scope of the committee.
and the scope and the function and what we're hoping to achieve and receive from this committee.
Okay, so you do want, go ahead.
So we won't do that tonight.
Well, we won't do the appointment tonight.
We won't
may-
be the appointments. We want to flesh out what collectively we feel is going to be the most effective way to get this project to either go or not go, and how we're going to do it.
To get clear on whether it's gonna go or not go and how to go about doing that.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's pretty much it. I'm concerned that there's a lot of backtracking right now. We made the decision at town meeting. That was decided at town meeting. I also want to say that I trust you to choose the composition of the committee. The steering committee made a recommendation, a suggestion. You don't have to accept that.
Right.
You get to decide how and how it's set up and who's on it. That's out of our hands, I think. We can try really hard to persuade you tonight. Okay, but essentially it is in your hands, I think. Okay,
yes.
and finally, I have to go back to something that Mr. Scheckman said, which is that the purpose is to explore the feasibility of the infrastructure. That's been done. It's been done pretty extensively. More can always be done. The committee has a lot to do. I mean, whatever it is, committee will have a lot to
Committee.
do. I have a lot more to say, but I'm just gonna stop there.
Thank you.
Who do you want to call on next?
Let's see, you were in next. Would you come up here?
What's your name? Michael?
And name please, and talk close so we can hear you.
Jared Birchmore. I just have a couple of things that I want to say. As a member of the current steering committee, I do want to echo some of the things that Arian had said, particularly around adopting and utilizing the foundation that the steering committee has spent hours and hours and a lot of resources into developing. I think that, you know, trying to backtrack and disregard the work that has been done thus far will put us back and also potentially make it so that this project would not be viable. I think being conscientious of the timing that we have right now is really important. Those of us that have already been displaced by floods that want to stay here are looking at this project and wondering when it will be coming to fruition, if that is a feasible option for us. And there are also people who are actively in the process of FEMA buyouts, and when those go through, we'll have to make a decision about whether they can stay in Plainfield or not. I think that it's really important to reiterate that the guiding foundation of this group of volunteers, when we gathered in July and August, was to allow the members of our community that are already here to stay here. That is at the core of this project. And I think that that needs to be really given the weight that it should. And that's also why I think the suggestion about allowing members of the current steering committee that are interested in being on this new committee to really prioritize those voices, because we have put in a ton of time and energy and dedicated passion to this project succeeding. And that, in my mind, is what this committee will be charged with doing. Is seeing if this is a project that can happen in real life. I also have a lot more things to say, but I'll stop there for now.
Thank you. I think we have a lot of folks. Lauren, you want to?
Michael?
Sure.
Amy? Okay.
No,
Yeah, you're right there.
Okay, I just wanted to say, I'm Lauren Geiger. I live at 36 Hudson Avenue in Plainfield. And I believe that there is a very, very vocal, determined minority that is trying to defeat this project. And I don't find it to be a coincidence that many of them are the people that live closest to the project. And I think that one of the things that I would say is that I believe that our architect has spent many, many hours and personal meetings with the abutters and the neighbors of the project to try to listen to their concerns and address them as well as possible. And I think that that has been almost, it's been a lot of time and a lot of energy that we have spent trying to address these concerns. I think almost disproportionate to the amount of time that we have spent trying to address the concerns of those who are unhoused or who are renting or who are looking for housing now in the village. I know that this, FEMA buyouts are on the horizon, and I know that there are people who have moved from the heartbreak to, out to Barry, to other towns, people who are trying to figure out what they're doing. There are renters. And to me, the idea of just, trying to build an infrastructure near the village that, would cost a considerable amount of money to house only the 8 people who were just housed, who have expressed interest in buying is, absurd, frankly. I mean, so, I also think that if anyone is familiar with the process that we have to go through in Vermont to build new housing, and the fact that so many creative housing solutions have been turned down throughout the state, there is a very, very lengthy process of public comment. There is review by the Design Development Review Board. There is review by the Planning Commission. There is the presentation of a preliminary plat. There is a public comment period. There are numerous hurdles to go through. And I think that the steering committee itself has gone through many, many hurdles and thoughtfully tried to address, and balance the needs of the neighbors and the abutters with the need for housing. So I would say that people are going to have many, many opportunities to comment and weigh in on this, including state officials, et cetera, et cetera. And I also think that the architect at the last DRB meeting specifically said that, through the process of public comment, this would become a better plan. So, those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lauren.
Amy.
Yeah, we have Amy on the screen.
Amy.
Go ahead. Amy.
Oh, okay, thank you. I just want to say thank you to David and Janice for commenting earlier. Yeah, David, I don't think I've heard you in a public meeting in the 30 years I've lived here. So thanks for speaking out, reminding us that we need to follow a democratic process. And I also want to thank considerably the group of people that have been working on this for so long and have worked so hard, and have worked for me, because I haven't been able to do the legwork. I was working and couldn't even attend any of the sessions. And as a renter who has lived in Plainfield for 35 years, I'd also like to speak for the 28 or 30 people that live just on Main Street that rent. And honestly, having an opportunity to stay in this town, and excuse me, it's emotional, to stay in this town and be able to actually own some land is huge. It's really big, and I just appreciate all the people that are working so hard on making this a reality. Honestly, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll need the mic.
We're gonna have Michael first.
I think Michael.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see Michael. Okay, go ahead.
Alicia, and
Sorry.
then Ethan, and then
Oh,
Ray.
and just before folks, for the record, Amy Lester, right?
Yes, thank you. Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
This will pick you up if you're standing there.
But the-
Well, it might be
but
it's for the room.
The room wants to hear you.
It's for the room.
Yes,
Okay. So I'm Michael Birnbaum.
you're gonna have to talk louder.
I'll hold it right here.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Michael Birnbaum and I thought the meeting was starting at 7, so I missed some critical stuff. I didn't hear what Arian had to say, and I'm sorry I didn't. I'm in that so-called vocal minority that is so-called opposed to the project, I want to clarify. First of all, we don't know if we're the minority. We don't know what all the townspeople think yet. We haven't had an Australian ballot. We're not going to for a long time. In a short time, a small number of us organically ad hoc got together and put together a petition just to express our concern about the process of choosing the committee. We support the vote from town meeting. We support that the select board is going to create the committee. Each of us has a different viewpoint. We're not monolithic. We haven't been working together for months as this steering committee has. We all have different points of view of why we're concerned. So I heard Denise, I heard David. They spoke for me, but they didn't speak for me. And I'm not going to give you my individual opinions about this. What I'm trying to say is that there's a good number of people in the town who either haven't expressed themselves or have, who are concerned with how the process has unfolded. We appreciate a lot of the work that's been done. We appreciate the energy and effort and time devoted to trying to make something better for the town we love. We would like to see the select board choose a committee and charge that committee unbiased towards the work that's been done so far, recognizing the work that's been done so far, taking into account the work that's been done so far, but not rubber stamping it until the new committee can thoroughly evaluate it, consider other possibilities, and possibly then choose that plan and possibly alter it. And the committee will be an advisory committee to the select board. The select board is who we elected to make decisions for us. So I agree and disagree with what Paul has. Absolutely, we voted to support continuing exploration of this project or of a project at least to find housing for people who were displaced and find housing for people in general because it's good for the town. That doesn't mean that everything about the project was endorsed in the town vote. We voted for the reserve fund and we voted to give the select board the endorsement to continue exploring it and to continue on its track, but to not be limited by what was developed by this group of wonderful volunteers who didn't have everybody included. I've spoken to some of others who dispute what is being said about them having been fully listened to. I have not been privy to those conversations. I can only hear, I heard their side of the story. I've heard the steering committee side of the story. I don't know what the truth is, but I think they should be heard some more if that's their feeling. I think that's enough. I'd like to figure out. Thanks for listening.
This is Francis Rose. I'm just gonna acknowledge that there's a 6-person stack right now. And there is, what I'm feeling is like kind of a repeat of town meeting. And I don't know if I'm speaking for the board or not. I want to honor and acknowledge, so the staff right now is Alicia, Ethan, Ray, Karen, Natalia, Betsy. Here we are. I would love to know why the alternate proposal for the committee. Why, for example, 6 people less? I was hoping to hear more about the why. That the changes made from that which distinguishes it from the proposal of the working group.
Well, and also why 21 in the first proposal?
What?
Why 21 in the first proposal?
Yeah,
I feel like we're rehashing the argument about the village project and not talking about how we create a committee.
So I would,
So
yeah,
that's the way it feels to us, at least.
I think we need to decide that what we're gonna call it. And I think we need to decide how many members at the very basic we should have on this. And then maybe we can come to a vision of what this committee will do. We have an executive session after this, so we'd like to keep things
Yeah.
moving.
Well, and I wonder if we, since the, Mr. Chair, since the agenda item is the actual creation of the committee, can we ask folks to keep their comments to the creation of the committee and the, structure of the committee?
I think we can do that. You stood up before that was suggested. I think we should do that.
I'm Alicia Weiss, and I wanted to stand here because I'm a little more.
Could you hold it close, please?
Look at my neighbors. Oh, sorry, I'm a sore throat. And I want to also try and honor what you've asked. And I think that, you know, if there are explanations about why numbers that need to be equally asked of both groups, but I want to go back to something. And that's why I voted no at the town meeting. And that was because I was not clear about what we were voting about. To me, it was amorphous, it was ambiguous. We had a lot of spirited discussion before that motion was 13 came forward. And if it was just to say, let's move ahead as the motion was written, we wouldn't have had that discussion. I think for anyone who has a question about whether we were forming the committee that might have been envisioned before that discussion, I would suggest reviewing the tape of the town meeting day. I've spent my life in a good portion of my life in scientific research and other research traditions. So I need operational definitions. I needed real clarity. I wanted to vote yes. I take exception to the fact that abutters, you know, it's not no chance that abutters are against the project. I'm not against the project. As a matter of fact, I was thinking last night about being really excited about having new vitality, because I remember when Plainfield was really a kick-ass place to live.
Can we stick to the committee, get the committee, okay?
Well, you know, I feel personally.
I appreciate that. There's a lot of emotion in here, but we have to get this done.
There is a list of people who signed the petition. It's about 60. But I have to say that a lot of people asked to be anonymous because they felt that they would be attacked for signing it. And I think that's significant. My request to the select board is that you, independent of either group essentially, constitute a charge, determine the composition, what's a workable number, and look to establish a committee that, while not throwing away good work that's been done, will balance urgency with thoughtfulness and come forth with the best plan for our town.
That's our intention. Yes, thank you. We had said,
So
we.
can I ask a question before we
Yeah.
keep going?
Please
All
do.
right. So we're 52 minutes into a 25-minute agenda item, and we have done none of the work of the agenda item. I just wonder, Mr. Chairman, I know we don't always follow this, but I know that at some point we can turn off public comment and just have us as a board discuss and try to work through the issue. And I'm wondering at what point we're going to do that this evening, because I don't know if comments are ever going to stop. And we haven't talked about specifics anyway, there's lots of things I could compare the two proposals. There's a lot of actual common ground in the two proposals, and there's some non-common ground. And so I just wonder when we're going to get to that portion. And I think we, as a select board, all know that there are a number of people who are very passionate about the project happening and wanting to happen with urgency. And there are people that are passionate about it slowing down and being less specific, and not being the Village Expansion Steering Committee's project. We know that we don't need to hear
Right.
more about that personally. I don't know if anyone else on the select board does. I just would love for us to talk just about, should there be 11 members on the committee, 15, 21? What's the name of the committee? What scope? That is the questions for this evening, not what we think happened on town meeting day.
Point of information,
Yeah,
point of information.
go ahead.
I would like to know, I don't think I need a
Okay.
mic for this quick thing.
You'd like to know what?
Use it,
This
please.
is Michael Billingsley. What I wanted to know is.
Would you give him the microphone,
Okay.
please?
Okay. Very quickly. If amongst the people who are in queue, there are people who would like to directly address the question about how the committee be formed and what its charge be and what some of the things might be. For instance, I have something to say that hasn't been said yet about just that. Will we be given an opportunity to do that?
I think Dan's point is well taken, and we should start this discussion about the committee
So-
itself.
So can we,
Which is what I said.
Yes.
Is that I would
can
like.
we reset the queue and then bring up a specific topic? And then get feedback on that topic. So maybe it's the
Yeah.
name of the committee.
Yeah.
We'll get feedback. Then
Let's-
how many members? We'll get feedback. What's the scope? We can
Yeah.
get feedback. We can hit them piece by piece rather than, I think that's the better way than getting general
Yeah.
pieces. So I think we
It's
start
not
with
an
the,
opinion thing. This is just a functional.
no, I understand.
Yeah,
Do you have a comment about the name of the committee?
I do not.
Okay,
okay, let's start with that. You referred to it as the East Hill Housing on your petition.
East Hill
You've
Housing
been-
Advisory Committee.
You've been using the expansion project with your, all the times you've discussed it.
The,
So this is kind of a board discussion here.
yeah,
Is there any board members who have another idea for a name of a committee? We need to have a way to reference this.
I,
Compromise and call it the East Village expansion.
Yes.
well, my only thing is that we had a specific name for the reserve fund. And if this committee is theoretically related to that item, we should probably name it related to it was the Village Expansion Reserve Fund or something.
On the east, that did reference. the east.
Well, yeah, but you can't get the whole, I don't think it said the East Hill. I think it said the east side of something.
Right, East Village.
I can pull it up.
Yeah, so.
I think the words advisory should be in it.
I
Yes,
do,
To be clear, it's an advisory committee to the select board.
Mhm. You're looking up the,
I'm looking up the town meeting day articles. Find them. Not it.
Mr. Chairman.
No, that's broken.
yes, sorry.
I just wanted to thank Dan for focusing us here and referring back to the select board's rules of procedure. And to remind the public that all select board meetings are meetings in the public, not of the public. This
Right.
is not a public hearing. This is the only time that we can deliberate. And we need the time to do that. That's why we build in public input at the beginning. We can always expand that, and I think the suggestion to that specifically by topic is helpful, but you must let us deliberate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, the link on our website is broken right now, so I couldn't click
Okay.
on the warning, so I'm trying to find it somewhere else.
So that would be a suggestion, is that we follow the reserve funds name. Any other thoughts?
I'll put forward again the East Village Advisory Committee.
Okay,
I don't,
what do you think, Patty?
I think we've been using the terminology village expansion for so long that it'd be confusing to change it at this point.
Well, we want to make sure it's distinctive from what's been,
Yeah, village expansion advisory.
Dan, I have the language.
Great.
The language of the article was to be called the reserve fund, to be called the Village Expansion Reserve Fund for the purpose of expanding the east side of the village by acquiring land, et cetera.
so what would that suggest for a name? I mean, the East Village Advisory Committee that Rose suggests is possible.
Yeah,
It's not matching our,
yeah, I do think, I agree, and I know it gets confusing with the steering committee name, but I do think since everyone is kind of calls it the Village Expansion Project in town, for us to not to have Village Expansion in the title, for people who are looking for information about this, they may not cue into it the same way if the title is different.
Mhm.
And we want people to have access to the information.
Then I would offer a friendly amendment that it be the East Village Expansion Advisory Committee.
Thank you. We're going to expect this committee as well. Well, first of all, does that sound reasonable to everybody? I don't think we have to vote on it. We have to decide collectively.
I think that doesn't there need to be a motion if we're gonna name it?
Yes, but we also have to say how many members and stuff when we do
Okay,
it.
so
So we'll do it all.
Put together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll put it in the notes all together and we can do one motion at the end of our deliberations.
Let's hold off on that unless, as Peter said, this is primarily at the time we get to talk. So go ahead, Peter.
In terms of this, is this on?
I don't think so. You might be on the mute. Let me.
Doug,
Is
it's
it red or
fine
green?
At the top, flip the switch up so you see the light there in the middle.
Is it green or red in the middle?
It's green, it's
All
not lit up, does that work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of the number, when I saw the initial proposal of 21, I thought that my initial reaction was that is way too huge, very unwieldy.
Yeah.
If you had 21 people and they each spoke for 3 minutes, that's an hour already. I don't think you're gonna get anything done. I think this committee needs to get some things done. And my personal bias would be more in the 7 to 9 range, quite frankly.
And I'd like to, can I get that? As a follow-up to that, Dan had a suggestion that the committee could be made up of a smaller number, but there could be subcommittees that do specific work on a specific task. And to me, that is probably more effective. And we find on the board now that we're 5, we can have 2 people work together on certain things, and it helps us with that decision. So 21 felt big to me, a lot real big, even 15, but it should be an odd number. So any other thoughts from the board?
One consideration that I'm carrying is the amount of labor required to carry forth this work. 15 has probably not felt like too much. Am I like casual nods, thumbs up? Has it felt like too much to have 15 people on the committee, on the working group so far? Okay, so in terms of like sharing labor to continue to see a thing through, I think at least keeping it level is my feeling. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so that'd be 15 from your perspective.
Yeah, I just have to push back and I think with the use of real subcommittees, and so thinking like 1 or 2 members from the committee would be on a subcommittee and then they would draw in expertise from people. So if it's the permitting process, finding people who have more expertise with the permitting process to be part of those subcommittees, then those 1 or 2 committee members go back to the whole. I think, I still think, I mean, I think for me, for my own comfort level, based on being on a lot of committees in a lot of different situations, 11 is the largest committee that I would be comfortable with personally. I think we could find a good diversity of perspectives with 11 people. You can have 5 or 6 committees with 1 or 2 people on our subcommittees. And just to have everybody, coming back to report, it's a manageable number for those bigger conversations when you need to have everyone weighing in. And also 6 people is a quorum, which is a number that's easier to get to if you have to have meetings and you're worried about quorum because it's summer vacation or something else is going on. So personally, originally I was thinking in the 7 to 9 range that Peter was, but I think 11 is about as big as that I would probably vote for personally. Well, I know it's just us talking.
Is this related to this number?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just had no comments. I know I think there's other people who.
By subject, so in this case, Tom.
You're on.
Not,
It's up to Carl at the end of the day.
I'm speaking specifically to the number of people, and the reason I'm doing it now is because to accomplish just looking at the range of tasks now, there are tasks involved with making a project of this complexity and size happen.
It's on,
It's
talk closer.
Yeah, you just have to have it closer to your mouth.
Closer.
All right, there we go, okay. For a project of this complexity and size, which I certainly can say as a person who's been looking in and participating sometimes with the steering committee, it's way beyond, it's way bigger. When you look at the permitting, when you look at the architecture, when you look at the engineering, when you look at the watershed, when you look at the things that need to be addressed on a regular weekly basis in some cases, it takes a lot of focus and human power to do it. Most of the committee meetings that I've observed or participated in up to now, they have been focused on tasks and quickly as possible dealing with actual headwinds that come from the permitting process or from the state of the place. I mean, I will just say quickly that there are things that come up that nobody envisioned. For instance, I am a group of near abutting or abutting neighbors at the bottom of the hill below the meadow. 5 of us together absorbed the runoff of 60% of that meadow. And therefore, I took it on myself to try and figure out the impact on our households of having that water come down the hill in a different way, because there was a neighborhood there. That's just one tiny little project that needs to be addressed.
How many people would you see on the
I
committee?
would recommend 11 to 15.
Okay.
In other words, the minimum being 11. Thank you.
Okay, yep.
Several people had their hands up, but he was chosen to speak and the other people weren't.
He was addressing a number of people. Do you want to? Okay, if Michael was here.
I'll be
Right
very
here.
quick. I've been.
You gotta use the mic, you gotta say
Oh,
your
sorry.
name.
I've been on lots of committees.
Your name.
Michael Birnbaum. Most recently, the CB Fiber Board, we had 20 delegates, 20 alternates, and some others. It was so unwieldy,
Too big.
way too big.
Okay,
I've been on committees with 6 or 5 like you are. Very effective. But when the task is complex and you don't have outside help, you need more people, you need more bodies.
mhm.
I endorsed Dan's number of 11, and the reason is because this committee should be charged to be able to reach out into the community and bring others onto their subcommittees so that each task, each complex task can be addressed. And the central committee of 11 or even less would be able to handle that because they're bringing in other experts.
And they can, yes. They can bring in community people as well. So did you have a number suggestion?
Natalia, I see that.
Okay. Noted.
Who's that who's speaking?
Right.
So I.
Name,
not-
name, please.
Natalia, I feel like the people who've been on the current steering community understand the breadth of this work that I will never understand, and I'm super grateful for that. And the fact that they're saying the number that they're asking for has been working for them. It doesn't matter how many committees I've been on. They're very tuned into this particular project, and I would encourage that they actually be seen as the experts in knowing the number that's gonna be useful and helpful to them.
So
I
that's
would
50,
be-
that's 15.
Yeah, so I would support that, and they felt like, actually, if
So
you
15
want,
seconds.
then that's great.
Okay, and did you have another thought on the number? Okay, thanks.
Were you supporting 15 or 21?
I was saying that if this current steering board is asking for 15, that is what I'm
They're asking for
supporting.
21.
And if, yes, and so right now they're at 15, correct?
No, they're at, well, they're currently at 15, they're asking for
Yes.
21 in their
Yes, so
proposal.
I'm saying that they're currently asking 15, they're currently at 15, asking for 21, and I would support them knowing that they need more support, not less.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Number question? Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
They can come up here. It'll be
Yeah, I got it.
easier for us. control.
Yeah, just, Jared Birchmore, just going off of what Natalia just said, as a member of the current steering committee, I do think that going any lower than the number that we have now feels like it would put a really, heavy strain on those individuals who are chosen. I think more than the 3 or 4 hour time commitment per week that we suggested in our proposal. So my suggestion would be, at the very minimum, maintaining the same level that we have been operating as at 15. And I personally think that more than that, up to the 21 number is reasonable, but I don't think that going below the number that we've been working with is a good idea in terms of sustainability for the individuals on that group.
Okay, thank you. I just have a question. At any given meeting where you have 15 members, how many people come?
I would say, yeah, I would say there's usually a couple people that miss, and so
Okay.
we probably
Okay.
are more in the 12 to, 10 to 14.
Okay,
I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of people who live in the same household who've been on the committee as well, so it's easy for them to show up. Yeah.
okay. So the idea is that it does, having more allows you to have people miss on occasion without real problem.
Yeah, and to have more than one person who goes to attend various specific tasks is really helpful for it's hard to pay attention to all things at all the time. It's hard to report on all things at the same time. It's 100% volunteer group. Of course, there are trade-offs, but it has seemed that larger has been more effective.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
My only pushback, and I'm one of the 15 names listed, and I think I've probably been to 2 meetings, so probably wasn't 15 very many times, and those were both on community engagement. I just think if the committee creates a subcommittee where the subcommittees are doing the task work, and then the committee is hearing about that and looking at the bigger picture, like, I think it would work much better, because I have, I am on the email list for this group because I'm listed here, and the amount of talking past and catching up and things that happen because there's so many people, and like 3 or 4, like, this is a good idea, let's start doing this. And then like another, wait, what's going on? Like, it just feels like throttling it down a little bit, making subcommittees that have specific tasks will be more organized. And then you will actually have more people, because each of those 6 subcommittees could have 1 or 2 people from the committee, but then could have 3 or 4 other people who are just have an expertise and an interest in that part of the project. And so you end up having 3, 4, 5 times as many people than the actual committee itself doing the work. So that's my personal opinion. And unless the chair yells at me, I'd like to not make a motion, because we're going to do all the motions, but I'd like to suggest 11 be the number that we go with and get the input from the rest of the group.
Okay,
Point of information again, point of information.
You don't have to recognize it.
yeah. Great. Peter, you had a thought?
Nodding yes to 11.
Okay.
11. Patty, what do you think?
Do you have any?
I have a hard time saying no to the people that have been doing the work. You know how many people they need.
So what number do you support?
Well, they're saying 15.
Nomenclature question?
Carl?
What's the question?
The question is, you're using the word subcommittee, and I believe someone, maybe Peter, could clarify whether a subcommittee is required to have minutes and notice, or whether it should be called a working group, which is another way of defining. the
Okay, Dan, you have experience of
Oh, I
committees.
I don't know the current state law on subcommittees versus working groups, but what I will say is I don't think we as a select board, unless somebody else changes my mind, are gonna be setting up those things statutorily here. The committee is going to gather and decide what makes sense for them, and they report back to us, because it makes no sense for us to say, you're gonna have a permitting subcommittee, and then 2 weeks from now, you realize you don't need a permitting subcommittee, and then they have to come back and say, okay, now we need the select board to vote to remove a permitting subcommittee. So I don't want to get us into that kind of bureaucracy. So whether we can call them working groups, subgroups, whatever we need to call them, I think we can look that up. But Carl, 11, thoughts?
Yes, and then just one other thought is that we're hoping to have just 1 or 2 people from this committee report to the select board. We don't need the whole group come in. So that would be another reason not to get too fussy with the subcommittees. I'm going to keep moving. And did you have a motion? Did you have any?
Well, I think we're gonna do one motion for the whole committee.
Okay,
I guess
all
I
right.
do like a straw poll
Okay,
on who's okay with 11.
yep.
Peter?
Peter?
I think, both of the steering committee and the petitioners, agreed that, the committee, the advisory committee should abide by the open meeting law. Arian, I know you made some statements at the beginning about what Vermont statute calls for advisory. I would have to do some research on that. I'm not particularly wedded to that. I would like to see our advisory committee meet the standards of open meeting law as our select board does. And just as our working task force go off and do things at the select board, that's not done with open meeting law. We're not noticing anything like that. It's like, it allows two of us to get together with a potential project manager on the Mill Street Bridge without having a whole public meeting. The contract has to come back here and has to be voted on as subject to all that. But if you tied the subcommittees up on that, you would take forever.
Yep.
Well, we wouldn't, yeah, we don't even have the Zoom number. We don't have enough Zoom accounts for that to even happen.
So far we have the name, the East Village Expansion Advisory Committee. And the 11 seems to be a number that's being used with the understanding that there'll be subcommittees that can expand that to a much bigger number. So is that where we are standing right now, board? You have something else?
I wonder about I welcome the inclusion of those who are critiquing this project. The intention here is to welcome, to include folks who have been critical of this project. If we're dropping the number from 15 to 11, granted, as Carl just stated, each one of those smaller working groups can, that number can balloon, that number can balloon to 25. And I wonder then, each voice becomes that much more critical to support the exploration, the continued exploration of this project. And I guess I'm asking the board, then if we say 11, then we have to also choose a number of those critical to the project. I think this is our time to clarify that as well.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that, Peter?
I interpreted the town meeting vote as a flying at 35,000 foot level approval of continuing with the development of an East Hill expansion project. If you go down from 35,000 feet, there are details upon which people disagreed. And there were votes in favor of and some opposed to the motion at town meeting, who basically were coming from the same place, like they liked the project, but they didn't like part of the process or some of the details, whatever. I think there are logistical reasons for why a working number like 11 is a good number, et cetera, the subcommittees. I also think it's important that we look to when this project will go before the voters. And that those votes are going to need to be earned by this committee and by the select board. And it is going to require an expansion of the current support this project has. And I think it's important for not just internal dynamics and functioning of the committee reasons, but external message to the broader Plainfield community. People who are concerned about what this project may mean to their property taxes and don't have particular concerns about how many dwelling units or how many roads or trees are planted. And I think that our biggest first step in creating this committee and its mission, what we are asking it to do, even more important than the number or its name, but what we're asking it to do, is going to be probably the most important step we take.
You have a recommendation?
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time speaking.
Sorry.
That, and I'm trying to get to your question about inclusive and exclusive. I think it's important that this committee, that we come up away with this committee, appointing a committee that has a different face than the current committee. That doesn't mean we don't acknowledge the work that has been done. That doesn't mean that we don't include those members in the committee. But I do think that in order to build long-term support for this project, we are going to have a different look. And the first step we take here is going to be very important. And Carl, to answer your question, I think, you know, we're not going to make those appointments tonight.
Right.
But I would hope that as we look to who has stepped forward, who has volunteered, there's a list, you know, that's been created. I've been reading through, I've been calling a couple of them to, you know, probe a little more about, you know, what are their skill sets? Because there are some things that need doing here. You know, what is this project going to cost? We don't know yet.
Right.
You know, that's one of the most important things we need to find out as soon as possible, because that will guide what we warn for a vote. It will, you know, and so I want to charge the committee, you know, as a top priority is get us real hard numbers. And how do we go about doing that? I think there are other things that we need to talk about with this committee and its charge as well. For example, I had an hour-long conversation with Will Colgan about a month or so ago, and an hour-long conversation immediately following with Mike Zoning. We were talking about the zoning at the particular time, and you know, what were the components of that zoning? And some of the components of the zoning that we adopted were specifically geared towards obtaining a NDA, neighborhood development area designation. And Will Colgan said to me at the time, "Oh, I'm hoping we can do that and include Goddard and the whole rest of the village, et cetera, et cetera." I mentioned that to Mike Zonner in the next hour conversation I had, and Mike said, "I'm not sure you want to do that. You may be way better off expanding your village designation, because the benefits of a village designation far outweigh the benefits of an NDA." I don't know the answer to that question, but that's a legitimate question that I think we should look at as a town. And I don't know if it's this committee's charge or if it's the planning commission's charge or both. But I think we as a town looking towards the future would be well served to ask that question, research it, and answer it. Because there are things like fundings for elevators that Mike Davidson might want to use in expanding up there at Goddard College. I think one of the most understated things that we did in adopting zoning was including that Goddard College campus in our village. And I don't think we want to ignore that.
Right.
So I do see overlap here. Anyway, I think, you know, the money, getting those numbers back here, looking at that designation as the way to go and potentially attracting funding here are things I would like to see this committee do.
Okay. I wrote down a few things that you mentioned. Cost has always been one. Getting hard numbers is really critical, especially if there's ever going to be any kind of voting by the community for bonding. Representation of the community is really critical of various points of view. Reporting to the board, you know, how's that going to be done? The reporting to the community needs to happen with agendas and minutes and so forth. The fundraising is gonna happen regardless. And what was the other thing? The last thing you mentioned. I guess, but those are some of the key items you mentioned, and I think those are exactly what we're looking to do. So the question is, how do we form this committee? And the numbers, like you say, is we can go back and forth on that. We could compromise at 13 if people aren't superstitious. But I do agree that if it's too big, it's going to be unwieldy and probably not as effective.
Comments about the number,
Do you have a thought on that?
on the number of folks?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. This is Ethan O'Hara. Whatever the number is, whether it's 11 or 15 or 21, I'd like to ask the board to include 1 or 2 additional seats for a committee member or members or a subcommittee tasked with listening.
With what?
Listening.
Ah,
Especially to voices that don't feel heard, voices that are critical of this project, with the idea of listening with our hearts to these voices, incorporating their ideas, and making this project even better, and something that more of us
okay.
are happy together.
I think that can be an internal decision by the committee once it's established. And it sounds like a great idea. Thank you.
I will just say, we already have, and I know there's some folks who reached out to me and said, when do I have to apply by? And I don't think we've set that yet, but we wanted to hear this discussion before they apply. But we already have 24 or 25 applicants. So whatever size committee we choose, we're not going to be selecting everyone who applies.
Yeah.
So I think, we should just realize that and realize that we have to try to a representation of voices without knowing that we're going to bring all the voices in. I was trying to find from these 2 proposals, the suggestions of who would be on it. I think proposal 2 just ask for diverse voices.
Yeah, seemed to be a fair amount of overlap to me and the 2
supporters, select board, yeah, avoid just. So I very roughly, and this is a starting point, so not wedded to it, but I was just trying to think if we do 11 and we can change the number, using some of the steering expansion proposal and just thinking through everyone else, if we had 2 abutters / neighbors, keeping it a little bit more open, 2 prospective buyers, 2 folks from the leadership of the village expansion, 2 folks that were specifically looking at technical experience, 2 folks who are just general. We have some folks that are just like, I've lived in town for a lot of years and I've seen different versions of the town and want to, bring that historical perspective. That's 10. And then
Marshfield.
up to do we have a Marshfield person? I don't even know if we're allowed to appoint a Marshfield person. I don't know if we've ever figured out if you can appoint a non-town resident to a town committee.
They could be,
Yeah.
they could be on one of the groups.
But also there's an idea that a select board member might be on the committee,
Select
which we
board.
haven't really talked about. But so
Right.
something like that is what feels good to me, where we're thinking about what's happening like directly in this right now, but also just pulling back and saying who has technical experience, who's just general residents who aren't put in. So that kind of mix of voices, and like a prospective buyer might also be part of the village expansion. They're there to try to represent prospective buyers. So just to put it out there, that it wouldn't only be potentially 2 village expansion folks, it would just be 2 explicitly village expansion folks, and then other folks based on, what perspectives they're bringing. And I will say from the 24 or 25 of these we have folks that hit all of these categories in those applications already, and I'm sure we will get more folks.
To me, 2 in the realm of technical expertise seems insufficient. So the amount of technical expertise required to move this project, a project of this size and scope forward thoughtfully. And I'm like noting hands in the back of the room, and I'm wondering, we are.
Yeah. Is this, Jake, is this
It's directly to the number.
okay, go ahead. come up, please.
Hey all, my name is Taylor Jake McBride. I am on the steering committee and I understand, not wanting it to be too big, you know, because it would be unwieldy. But to be completely honest with you, there's how many, 16 of us, I think? And, it's been a ton of work on the individual level for 16 people. And that's just been in these initial phases, not once we're really getting into the nitty gritty. And so I think we would be remiss to reduce the number of people on the committee. I think that's what Francis Rose just said makes absolute sense to me. I think having 2 people with technical expertise on this team is not enough. And I think it should be closer between 15 or 20 people. And like Dan just said, you know, we have 24 applicants, so people who have expressed interest. And so we have the numbers to support that. As a town, we're already understaffed and overburdened. And so my goal for this number would be to be able to hold the project fully and to try to not have that burden fall on the town. Something else that happens, and Arian, I mean this with all due respect, but certain people become the face of the project if they have the time, energy, and resources to give to it. And so if you have 10 people and 3 of them can show up regularly, that's the face of the project, whether you like it or not. And that's something that we have experienced and it has not worked in our favor, despite those people having the best intentions. Becoming the face of the project is not what they wanted, but that's how it became. So I think as many people as we can while making it manageable is the smart move here. Thank you.
Thanks for the input. Thoughts from the board? I want to keep things moving. We're going to have a really late night tonight after we get through this.
We still have other items on the agenda.
Yeah. I'm hearing that this group of 15 has gotten a huge amount of work done and seems to have done it pretty well. I'm also hearing the 11 number as seeming to be better. But if we as a select board ask the committee, whatever size it is, to have representatives who come to us with reports, who can tell us what the various committees are doing, it feels like we could have a little bigger committee and have it function. But the committee has to organize itself once we establish it, but we do have to decide what we feel comfortable with the number. I'm just hearing more because of the amount of work to do, the diversity of it might be smarter.
Talking about the technical expertise issue, I'm not sure. I was looking at all of the comments that the people who would sign up. I'm not sure the technical expertise we're going to need is actually among those committee members. It's going to be, I think when we get into engineering and stuff, we're talking about people outside. I would be looking for people who could ask the critical questions of those experts. Which might imply, do you have planning commission background? Do you have experience with Act 250 background? Do you have experience with public financing background? And there's a shortage of that in the people who've signed up on the list so far. That doesn't mean it's not there, but that would be, if there are people who haven't signed up who would like to and have that expertise, I encourage you to do so. But I think when we get to that technical stuff, we're going to be needing professionals.
For sure.
How much is the sewer, the water, the roads, the tree planting, et cetera, going to be? We can all have our opinions on that and what looks good on a drawing and stuff, but that's different than having an engineer, for example. Anyway, my comments.
Okay.
I'm wondering, Mr. Chairman, if we need to fully define the mission tonight, or whether we take the input that we've gotten here and maybe a subcommittee of 2 of us prepare a proposal for the full select board, and we come back to that at our next meeting.
Well, given the time and the fact that we're not going to resolve it tonight, I think that makes a lot of sense. What are the other board members feel?
Agreed.
The next meeting, we have a plan. Who would like to be, we can have two people, so we could have a committee of two to look at this. You're pretty tied up. You're in the highlight of your season.
I could meet next Sunday. Realistically, because I know you and I have a meeting Wednesday night with the.
We have Wednesday, I have a Thursday night meeting, and yeah. It's a good thing I'm not making maple syrup this year. I never have anything to.
We can also, I think we can also exchange emails too.
Yeah, okay.
You know,
Well, I would be on that group, that committee, and if anyone else is interested.
I thought, are we only allowed two? Or is
Two.
it-
Yeah,
I would be on that committee.
okay. Well, if you wanna with Peter, that would be great.
Wait, was Peter saying he doesn't have time or?
I was saying he doesn't have time, but he said he did.
I thought you said you didn't until next Sunday.
Until next Sunday, that's correct.
Would you have time? You've been busy, I know.
No, it's legislative session.
Yeah, okay.
There's a lot going on.
I'd be willing to, put some thoughts down and send them to the two of you.
Sounds good.
That'd be great. Why don't you and I do it?
Okay.
If that's approved, if that's okay with everybody. So the next meeting, we're gonna, Rose and I are gonna work on, a format that we think is gonna be workable. And, try to come up with a number that everyone will support and a mission primarily. And we would ask the community who's interested in being on this committee to think about how you could contribute to it. And if anyone's interested in leading that committee, you should work that out so we can save time. We don't want this to be a 2-month process. But this feedback for the board is very helpful, and we do appreciate it. We're gonna have to close it there because we are gonna be going into executive session momentarily.
No, not yet. We got that, then that.
Oh, yeah,
then
okay.
Then that, before we go into executive session.
Right. Okay, it's gonna be a late night.
All right.
What was the discussion of the traffic study? Was there a traffic study done?
That can get punted to another.
Okay.
Really, yeah.
But was there work done on a traffic?
It will be there, presumably there will be one for the DRB.
Okay, we're gonna return to the traffic study.
Can I speak to the energy of this meeting? It's a little funny. And I want to take responsibility for it in that I didn't schedule a special meeting of the select board entirely to discuss the committee formation. And because the committee formation discussion has lasted the duration of the entire average select board meeting, we now have an entire meeting to get to thereafter. So if you have felt constricted in your ability to speak, I apologize. There is a long agenda here with lots of juicy articles of discussion. And so, thank you for offering us any grace here as we try to facilitate this meeting to completion while getting our attention on that which is calling for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. You're welcome to stay until we're executive session. We have a DRB appointment to make. Jesse Cooper is offered to be on the DRB. Do I have a motion for him joining?
I make a motion that Jesse Cooper be placed on
Does he
that.
want to be the planning commission?
Is there a second?
Can you be on the planning commission at the same time? Yes.
Sorry, I'm trying to get the notes.
Yeah, that's
I didn't know
okay.
you were doing that. I thought you were doing that at the end, so.
I moved it in front of the executive session.
Is there a motion?
Made by Patty.
Patty, motion,
Second,
second,
I just have a comment.
yes.
There was a question raised as to whether someone could be on both the planning commission and the the DRB, and the answer is yes.
Okay,
And a lot of towns have people on both.
that's a good, thank you for that. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of appointing Jesse Cooper to the DRB, say aye.
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 Does that make the DRB an even numbered board now?
I do not know. It might. I think there's 3 active and there's now would be 4. So anyone interested? Step up. Okay, discuss. I'm not sure what discussed I wasn't involved in this one.
The timeline.
Yeah,
Is anyone from the working group prepared here now tonight to discuss the timeline of the project?
I can just speak to that briefly.
Behind you, Aaron, is Sandy raising her hand.
Okay. I think
keep it
yeah,
brief,
just
please.
briefly, the timeline is extensively dependent upon what the overall mandate is coming from the select board, because everything is turning on that. The number and all these other things, they don't resolve this issue, and I think substantially that everything hinges on that.
Okay.
Unless you just Sandy may have other things to add.
Yeah.
I made it the first, my name's Sandy Vidston, and I'm working as the architect on the expansion project. There are a number of elements to the overall project that are not specific to design. There are a lot of supporting aspects. And one of them is traffic. And the other is all of the elements that go into the timeline for the project. So I have been really putting some effort in the last week of thinking and talking to various people about how the timeline would go for the project. And at a very high level, the major aspects to consider are the select board itself, the DRB process, how fast the engineer can design when the design is known, wetlands negotiations, other state permits, and then how the construction bid might work, how the homeowners fit in, and getting to the finish line.
Okay.
So that's, when you are ready, I don't know that tonight is the night to get into details whatsoever, but we are working on that, and we have made significant progress on the budget. Right now, an estimator is checking numbers because we really want to be accurate. Likewise, I have started to talk to contractors in general about sequence. And we've discovered a number of ways to make the construction more efficient. So that affects the timeline. So I wanted to just report back that all of these various aspects, they connect, and we're working on them in the background.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah, Jake, on this point, I assume. Yeah.
Taylor Jake McBride, on the timeline front, I think FEMA buyouts are another big thing that needs to be considered. I think Sandy briefly mentioned that earlier, but this isn't a hypothetical, like this is something that is in the process of happening and like really accelerating now. And I'm not trying to, talk about things that I shouldn't be talking about, but that is happening. And I believe there is a time limit on how long people have to accept their offers. I believe it's a year. And so if we, I'm all for being thoughtful, and sometimes that means moving slowly. But part of being thoughtful right now means moving relatively quickly, because that's a lot of money that is coming into our town. In terms of in the form of FEMA buyouts, that will lose, that will go to other towns. So that's another piece of timing that I'm considering, that people are gonna start receiving offers soon. Some of them may have already, and are gonna be making decisions on that, and they have a year to accept.
Speaking just a timeline.
Yeah, just a timeline.
Yep, exactly. To follow quickly on that, I made a phone call yesterday to a person who accepted a buyout in Marshfield. And their timeline was that between the time that they were approved, which has just happened for 10 families here. Timeline between when they were approved, and when they closed was approximately 5 months, which involved the engineering study about how it would be demolished and arranging the contracting for that, and having the house appraised, et cetera. So if you think the buyouts are being offered last week or this week, then we're talking sometime in August, the earliest payouts would occur, where people would actually have the money in hand. So that's fairly soon.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna have to move it along. So, does that answer the questions on the timeline that you
Yeah,
had in mind?
Can I just
Yeah.
and Michael, maybe, so what happened, because not everybody knows all the things that happened, and we get emails about a group of 10 folks that were affected by the 2024 flood, got information that they were accepted into the program for the buyouts. They have not gotten the appraisals, they have not gotten figures of what the buyouts would be, but 10 houses, and my understanding is it's a number of those houses are the ones we thought were kind of on the margin about whether they would be accepted or not. A lot of the other ones are much more clear cases of buyout. And so it makes us, as a town, feel confident that all the folks who went for buyout are probably going to get buyout. We don't know that for sure, but based on this information, and they're doing them in groups of 10. So we may find out about 10 more tomorrow or next week. We don't know, but that's how they're doing it, just to get some information.
That's good information. And also the homeowners can decide if they're in the buyout program to not take it up to the last minute. If they aren't offered enough money, or if the costs are too high, they don't have to take it. So that's important to know too. Peter?
I had a question. For Michael, actually, as the buyout coordinator for the 2023, the properties along Route 2, where are they?
All three of the properties along Route 2 or School Street are approved. The homeowners are just poised to start getting appraisals.
They haven't gotten appraisals yet.
They haven't gotten appraisals yet. I spoke to one of the homeowners. I met with them actually 3 days ago.
Any other questions on the board? Okay, we'll move along. So we did Jesse Cooper, and then executive session is the next.
No.
What am I
Are we
missing?
talking about this?
Okay.
It's on the agenda.
Yeah, it's on the agenda. The discussion of the offer from unsecured $150,000 loan from the Vermont Community Foundation. Can you address what that's about? And yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Arian.
Arian Twimmery, in preliminary conversations with Lawrence Miller, who's runs the Vermont investment portfolio of the Vermont Community Foundation. He has expressed an interest, and his committee has expressed an interest in loaning Vermont, the town of Plainfield, $150,000 to continue with engineering studies for the village expansion project. In an unsecured fashion, meaning that we don't have to put down collateral or other things like that, in order to get that money, with the intention that the money would either be paid back with grants and or by proceeds from sales of the project of land, with the project actually moving forward. So this is just more of an informational at this time. They have not written a firm letter, but it's to sort of ties into the question of timeline, because if the project is to move forward, there are some, we would need to go into a whole other phase of engineering that is, we spend that $150,000 on, along with engineering and permitting fees. So this is saying this is the mechanism, at least that our informal group would propose to keep the project going, along with additional grants that have been applied for. So that's kind of an FYI. There is no action item on that at this time, because there is no formal proposal.
So once this new committee's formed, that would be part of what they would have to consider.
Yeah,
They will see.
yes, yes, to pursue that, but it would be I assume a select board
The
decision.
select board have to
We
approve.
would have to approve it, yes.
Okay. Peter?
Had a question. Thanks, Aaron.
Just a couple of questions. Sandy just referenced, you know, the fact that there's nearing ending of engineering numbers for budget purposes. And I'm like, if we're nearing the end, then what is this 150,000 for? And specifically, how was the 150,000 arrived at?
Those are both great questions. So what we were finishing the engineering on, and Sandy, correct me if I use the wrong words here, is that we were finishing the schematic phase of engineering, which is sort of struck, how would this look generally? How would the specific concepts work? The next phase of engineering has to go with getting into the construction documents. So it's one thing to say a road is gonna be here, and it's this wide, and it's wide here, and there's a culvert there. It's another one to say, this is the actual specification for every material that's in here. Here's exactly how it goes. Here's how it gets laid down. Those are the 4 construction engineering documents.
Water, sewer too?
With water and sewer as well. So that would be the next phase. So to go from schematic, which is pretty accurate, but it's still conceptual, to actually like, here's the set of drawings that you give to contractors that they bid. And that is a whole nother level of detail. And the 150,000 would be bid for, there would be a phase of engineering, an RFP for that, that would be bid. The estimation is that engineering in of itself would come in somewhere around $130,000 between additional aspects that would include additional wetland work, which we've done some delineation to date, but we would need to have concurrence on some parts that have been delineated with the state. They stopped doing work in October. There would additionally be a little bit of money in there probably for some legal, because we have encumbered some legal fees with Brian Amons, who was on the call for a little bit. I'm not sure if he's still there, but and then there also would be some permitting fees. So for example, to even go through the wetland permitting process, we're looking at around $5,000 worth of fees to just even keep that going. So that is a rough approximation of where that $150,000 goes and what it gets.
Great. Does that answer your question? Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
I have an important additional quick thing to add, just quick fact.
Yeah, go ahead.
Back quickly to the question, Michael here, back quickly to the question about the buyouts and the sequence of buyouts and how many households are approved. The 10 households that have approved have a allocated amount of money between federal and state funds to put into the cost of buying out the properties, demolishing the houses, and doing all the legal work that's involved. I just thought it would be helpful for people to know in terms of the influx of funds that the first 10 households represents about $3,730,000 for 10 households. That's been allocated. That would be coming into the town. So in terms of talking about, as Jake mentioned, part of the timeline is that, yes, we can be moving forward, but there is also going to be money in hand. It is actual real money that would be made available when the decisions are made household by household, and it's roughly that.
Okay, good. Any other questions?
So we can read the comments that are coming in. Thank you. Okay, yeah, down from there. Thank you.
This is AI summary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just all, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's time for
Yeah, I think we're moving on to the executive session. This is a closed session with invited guests only. Thank you all for coming and bringing your input. We will be working on that, won't we?
We'll get them. Don't worry about chairs.
Yeah, we'll
figure it
get the
out.
chairs.
We'll
We'll
get
get them. Thanks.
And so, Francis Rose, other than Brian, who's our attorney, you can just move everyone else out of the meeting. You can just do it individually. It's probably, some of them will probably leave themselves. But For executive session.
Excuse me.
Say this. All right, it's
So we are
8:53 PM.
8:53 coming out of executive session. And would you read? the-
Yes.
Yeah.
In executive session, it was decided to have our real estate attorney, or give our real estate attorney the ability to work on real estate negotiations, subject to the limitations placed in the executive session.
Good job. And is there a second for that?
Second.
And all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, you're all formal, Brian.
Very good. That was good job. Thank you.
Good night.
Yeah,
Okay,
good
I
night.
get the-
Signing off.
Yes, you can. That's what
Yep,
we need right now.
thank you.
I motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Really?
Second, second.
I'll second that. All those in favor, say aye.
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 I hope
Well,
we recognize